ETE Emetap Seni Senet Akwastajet Akuja Seneb Dua Henu. And thank you for listening, of course, to another episode of Praise the Divine Heck in the Chair. I'm your brother Asar M. Kar, the Nature. And of course, this is part of our Sir Alan Gardiner series. Currently, we're going to read his whole book all the way through on Egyptian grammar. So buckle up. This is what I call a boring set. So yeah, you know what it is. It'll be exactly that. But the work is interesting enough where we can have the whole thing on YouTube, right? And so we'll be critiquing as well as going over, and some parts just reading through. There it is. We left off on section B last time, the intro. So without further ado, let's get to it. The Egyptian writing, just going to cover the different types. The hieroglyphic writing is an offshoot of pictorial art, a very early and important function of which was to provide a visible record of facts and occurrences accessible to those who for one reason or another were beyond the range of the spoken word. The limitations of pictorial art as a medium for conveying or storing information are, of course, obvious, and recorded history may be considered to have been non-existent until shortly before the end of the pre-dynastic period, the Egyptians discovered the principle of the rebus or charade. The new departure consisted in using the pictures of things, not to denote those things themselves or any, we'll finish that sentence, cognate notions, but to indicate certain other entirely different things not easily susceptible of pictorial representation, the names of which chance to have a similar sound. Let's go back up to those footnotes. And see, we do this because a lot of people, they don't read the hieroglyphics, the metal netra. Some of us can read them. We're increasing your ability to do so by reading this book today. See Appendix A at the end of the book. That was for the first note. For the general theory, see Seth, das Hieroglyphics, Schrift Systems by Leipzig. See Crumb's remarks and the JEA. And also in wider perspective, ID von Blei, Zum Utschaden Leipzig, a popular account by the present writer of the JEA, 261, just for your info. So a lot of people are literate to this. So as you can see here, they don't know what this says. They have no idea what this says. They don't know Narmer is up here. They don't know this is the Necharet Bot, the goddess Ba'at. They don't know this is Heru digging in this guy's, he's digging him out. They don't know the sandal bearer. They don't know who this is. Most people know this is Narmer, right? They don't know how. They just, they've heard us say it before. This is why we read a book like this. So obviously, proper names could only be communicated in this way. And it is perhaps with them that the hieroglyphic writing began, Annex Cut. So let's read under this stela here. Verso of the slate palette of Narmer, Dynasty 1. This is one of the oldest specimens of Egyptian writing known. The name of the king written with the Ner fish and the Mer chisel. Let's see if we see it. Let's zoom in to make sure we see it. I think we've got a winner. So here's the Ner fish. See its gills, see its fins. Here's the chisel. Nar Mer. Pictograph, as they explained, it is. So we can see them being correct on that point, right? Let's keep going. This is good because you got to check. You got to check to make sure what they say is right, right? We checked it. So the Nair fish and the Mer chisel occupy the rectangle below, page 72, between the Heru heads, which we just watched. They call it Heru, we call that Ba'at for another reason. The other small hieroglyphs give the names or titles of the persons over whose heads they are written. The captured chieftain, they may have been named Wasi. It's a harpoon for Wa, pull for Sh. The group at top on right was probably intended as an explanation of the picture in the center. At this early date, the gist of complete sentences could apparently be conveyed only by symbolic groups in which the elements suggested separate words. So they're saying full sentences weren't quite there, except for in the pictographical form. So they're using pictures to complete the sentences. You know, you got Narmer, you see his castle, the Sarek in the middle, and you've got the Necharet Bat or Het Heru, if you will. So you've got these pictures on the side of this here. The only thing that actually makes a phonetic sound in this case is this nerve fish, and this nar fish, and this mer symbol, the chisel. And the Sarek over time does as well. But these two out here in this pic, they don't. They don't. They're just pictures. Let's keep going. The group at top on right was covered that. Separate words covered that. The conjectural meaning is the falcon god Heru, Horus, the king, leads captive the inhabitants of the papyrus land. T Mehu, or as we know now, Ta Mehu, the delta. With them, that hieroglyphic writing began. See the annexed cut? The method was that which Prior Burton in the Middle Ages playfully symbolized his name by a thistle or burr placed upon a barrel or tomb. In similar manner, the notion of high, let's go down, numbers such as 1,000 or 10,000 could only have been conveyed pictorially by the thousandfold or 10,000-fold repetition of a stroke or of the object to which the number referred. And even if the draughtsman had accomplished the laborious task, the spectator, desirous of grasping the meaning, would have been condemned to the hardly less laborious task of counting the strokes or objects so depicted. And what they're basically saying is that they would make a picture to show you 1,000-fold or 10,000-fold, as opposed to having you count 10,000 strokes, right? Let me place you guys on hold for just a brief moment. And thanks for the brief hold. Let's get back to the grind. So that's what they're doing. They're pictographically, it was easier to write something than trying to write 1,000 or 10,000 strokes. Let's keep going. Right here, the Egyptians adopted a simple way of avoiding this difficulty. The word for 1,000 in Egyptian was ka, and that for 10,000 was the jeba. Well, ka in Egyptian also meant lotus, and the jeba meant finger. In order, therefore, to write 32,000 cattle in hieroglyphs, all that was necessary was to depict the 3 fingers and 2 lotus plants in close proximity to the image of an ox. Thus, you have it right there. ka, there goes your ox. 1, 2, 3, that's 3,000, or that's 30,000. And these are these onions, 1, 2, 32,000. So 1, 2, 3, you got 30,000. 1, 2, add 2 more thousand at the end with those two. And what are we talking about? Bulls right here. As is hinted by the example just quoted, Egyptian hieroglyphic writing did not attempt completely to replace pictorial elements by sound elements throughout the entire course of its history. That script remained the picture writing eked out by phonetic elements. Hieroglyphic writing may be said to have come into existence as properly differentiated entity at the moment when, in a given pictorial representation, one portion of the objects figured was shown in a miniature and was clearly intended to be interpreted in terms of language, while the other portion, of larger size, was no less clearly intended to be construed purely visually without reference to language. The development of Egyptian writing is well epitomized in those sculptured scenes on the walls of tombs or temples where what cannot easily be represented pictorially is conveyed by sequences of hieroglyphic signs graven above the figures to which they refer. By this means we may not merely watch the ancient craftsmen at their work, but even overhear their banter and listen to the songs they sing. Number 6, even in the fully developed form of hieroglyphic writing, only two classes of signs need be clearly distinguished. These are sense signs or ideograms, weak idea form in grammar writing, basically. Sound signs or phonograms, Greek phone sound in grammar writing. So you have those two, sense signs and sound signs. One is idea, one is for phone and sound. Idea and form, one is for phone and sound. Ideograms are sense signs. Ideograms or sense signs signify either the actual object depicted as this is sun, Jebu for hill country, or else some closely connected notion as Ra, the sun, in the sense of day, or Heru, the sun, in the sense of day. Sesh, a scribe's palette, water bowl, and reed holder in the sense of scribe, write or paint. Phonograms or sound signs are signs used for spelling, which, although originally ideograms and in many cases still also employed elsewhere, as such have secondarily acquired sound values on the principle explained in Rule 5. Examples are Ra for mouth, from original Ra for mouth. In Egyptian, Ra, as I just said. This is per, from original per for house, Egyptian paru. Not the blood sign, not the blood gang. Let's read the footnote. In strictness, ideograms represent words rather than objects or notions connected therewith. Nevertheless, substitution of the term word sign could only obscure the clear distinction above made. The pronunciations here given are reconstructions from Coptic po, mouth, and oath for roof. So now, what we have above from Sir Alan Gardiner says that the pronunciations, meaning the way that you would say these words, is reconstructed, or we know how to say these in English because we know from the Coptic use of them, which means Coptic is the final form of Egyptian, and you know how to say Ra instead of just because Egypto-speak would have this as ER. It will have this as ER. You get this from Coptic, so we know how to pronounce it. This is just per. We get Paru because we know how the Coptics pronounce it, meaning roof. The hieroglyphic writing, vowels not written, most vowels not written. So, in reading the last section, the student has doubtless noted that the sound vowels derive from the ideogram of the mouth, which is ra, and from per, the ideogram of the house, paru, actually, were said to be not ra and paru, but simply the consonantal elements entering into those two words, namely and per. To put it differently, the Egyptian scribes ignored the vowels in writing. It thus came about that both these signs could be used in a far greater number of different words than would otherwise have been the case. Ra might virtually represent Ra, or Resh, Ray, or Resh is here actually, Rek, Rak, Re, Ar, Sher, Er, or any other combination of vowel and R that the Egyptian language might contain. Similarly, Per might stand, or Paru might stand, not only for Paru, but also for Per, Aper, Eper, Epra, and so forth. A like neglect of the vowels is seen in Phoenician, Hebrew, and Arabic, though in certain other Semitic scripts, Babylonian, Ethiopic, the vocalization is always indicated. The reason for the Egyptian omission of the vowels is not far to seek. It is characteristic of the family of languages to which Egyptian belongs that one and the same word presents different vocalizations according to the forms that it assumes and the context in which it appears. Thus, the ideogram for house, pronounced par from paru, in isolation may well have represented per when followed by a genitive and triu in the plural. Such a variability of the vowels could not fail to engender the feeling that consonants were all that mattered, whereby it became easier to utilize the sign paru for writing other words pronounced with per in that order. Whatever vowels they may have possessed, in actual fact, par is found in the writing of words which we have reason to believe may have been spoken as peraref or peroraref. He habitually goes up, and prayet for spring. Number 8, hieroglyphic writing. Now we'll get into the different forms. Hieroglyphic writing is only one of three kinds of script which in course of time were evolved in ancient Egypt. Out of hieroglyphic sprang a more cursive writing, known to us as hieratic. So there's been a discussion as of late. Did hieratic come before the hieroglyphic? Sir Alan Gardiner gives us his take. He says here, out of hieroglyphic sprang a more cursive writing known to us as hieratic. And out of hieratic again, there emerged towards 700 BC a very rapid script, formerly sometimes called incorporeal, but now always known as demotic. So anyone who tells you that demotic or hieratic come before the hieroglyphic, they haven't done the work. They haven't done the work. None of these styles of writing utterly banished the others, but each, as it arose, restricted the domain of its progenitor. In the Greco-Roman period, all three were in use contemporaneously. Hieroglyphic owes its name to the fact that in the latest times it was employed almost exclusively for sacred Greek hieros inscriptions, sculptured Greek glypho on the temple walls or on public monuments. At the outset, hieroglyphic was used for all purposes, on stelae of stone and the like. The signs are incised or more rarely in raised relief without interior markings. In temples and tombs where their decorative effect was of account, the hieroglyphs were often executed with the most elaborate detail and beautifully colored. Upon papyrus, the outlines were, on the other hand, abbreviated to a very considerable extent. For specimens of these different types, that in a minute. The self-convincing views on this topic are vindicated by Adrian DeBuck. The asterisk indicates the reconstruction, so mark is purely hypothetical. Right. For specimens of these different types of hieroglyphic writing, see the frontispiece, plate 1. As time went on, hieroglyphic became restricted more and more to monumental purposes, though for religious texts it was in general employment, even on papyrus down to the end of Dynasty 20, as an occasional medium for writing text on potsherds or papyrus. It survives right down to the Christian times. So when people say that hieroglyphic wasn't the sacred text, as we just read for the Greeks, this was the sacred text for the Greeks, the hieroglyphic. The hieratic was used, yeah, but the sacred text was the hieroglyphic. And we can read the hieroglyphic, can't we? Right. Let's keep going. The next form, hieratic. So-called because in the Greco-Roman age it was the usual script employed by the priests. Greek hieraticos, priest, is the name now given to all the earlier styles of writing, cursive enough for the original pictorial forms of the signs to be no longer clearly recognizable. Hieratic was nothing more in the beginning than hieroglyphic in the summary and rounded forms resulting from the rapid manipulation of a reed pen as contrasted with the angular and precise shapes arising from the use of the chisel. So let's read that again, because this will put that whole argument in discussion in a nutshell and sum it up. Hieratic was nothing more in the beginning than hieroglyphic. It says it right here. In the summary and rounded forms resulting from the rapid manipulation of a reed pen, as contrasted with the angular and precise shapes arising from the use of the chisel. So it's simply the cursive form of hieroglyphic, and it gets its start from the hieroglyphic. So let's dead that argument altogether right there with that sentence. Under the Old Kingdom, hieratic is hardly differentiated from hieroglyphic. Under the Middle Kingdom and in the 18th dynasty, hieratic is invariably used on papyrus, except for religious texts. So when somebody is running around, and I'm not going to say his name, we was on Sonetta with him. When somebody is running around talking about hieratic is the one, hieratic is what the priests use, hieratic is the religious text, hieratic. Let's read the sentence again. It says, under the Middle Kingdom, under the Old Kingdom, hieratic is hardly differentiated from hieroglyphic. Number one, we know which one came first because we just heard the statement. It says, under the Middle Kingdom and in the 18th dynasty, Akhenaten, Amenhotep III is daddy, King Tut, blah 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 blah, is invariably used on papyrus except for religious text. Except for religious text. Let's keep going. It is developing a relatively consistent orthography of its own and distinguishes both more and less cursive varieties. Religious texts on papyrus begin to be written regularly in hieratic about Dynasty 21, and from that time onwards, sporadic inscriptions on stone in the same script are found. In the latest period, as already said, hieratic was generally employed by the priests when writing religious texts on papyrus. On stone in the same scripts are found. In the latest period, as already said, hieratic was generally employed by the priests when writing religious text on papyrus. Dynasty 21 onward. So not in the beginning. Let's go further. Let's go to the demotic text. Demotic, Greek demoticos, popular, or incorporeal, Greek, Enkorios, native, as some of the earliest decipherers called it, is a very rapid form of hieratic that made its first appearance about the time of the Ethiopian dynasty. Now, here's another discussion that pops up. Some of us are conflicted concerning. This says right here, Encorio. What does Enkorios mean? It means it's native to the people, and it's demotic. And where do we find the script first? Egypt. As some of the earliest decipherers called it. So remember who called it this? The first decipherers of the language. Is a very rapid form of hieratic that made its first appearance about the time of the Ethiopian dynasty, which is probably around dynasty 24 to 26. When you start to get Shabaka, you get your Nehi, etc., etc. So if it appeared when they came around, this is controversial. It's more likely that they brought it with them as the form of hieroglyphic that they knew how to write. And it's called demotic. And even though the Greeks claim it as their own, we have it right here, native. It's Encorio. It's a native writing, according to the earliest decipherers. And it appeared when Ethiopians appeared. Not when the Greeks came. Greeks came 12th dynasty. Remember? They didn't have this. So this is up in the air for debate. Appeared around the Ethiopian dynastic period. Anyway, just to throw that out, because we're almost done for the day. Throughout the Ptolemaic and Roman ages, it was the ordinary writing of daily life, and it is occasionally found even upon stelae of stone. For specimens of hieratic and demotic, see Plate 2. With demotic, we are not concerned at all in this work, and with the hieratic, we deal only insofar as it has been converted, or to employ the usual term, transcribed, into hieroglyphic. Individual hieratic hands differ, as all handwriting is apt to differ. For this reason, Egyptologists, before translating a hieratic text, habitually transcribed it into hieroglyphs, just as the modern printer sets up a modern author's manuscript in type. So, in order for Egyptologists to read a lot of the hieratic and demotic, they would have to take the text and transliterate it into the hieroglyphic. Why? Because as explained before, the hieroglyphic is the clearer method of writing. You can understand each letter, each ideogram, each syllable sound. And then they would be able to understand what was written in the demotic. Then they can make the corrections after looking at it and transcribing it with the demotic to make sure that they were right, or to make any corrections if they got something wrong. Comprende. And then we just dispelled 2 arguments in that reading today. Actually 3. 2, because 1 is still undecided, right? And that would be this one here, the Encorio portion of the demotic, and who uses demotic first. Let's read the footnote, because we're not getting into portion C today. We'll stop here. The tradition and its interpreters will cover that later. As Christianity spread throughout Egypt, the knowledge of the old native scripts and lore, long since the jealousy, blah, 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 blah. We'll get to that probably tomorrow. C. Moeller, Heinrich Paleography, 3 volumes from Leipzig. Ergansungschaft, however you say that. Sorry about butchering that for you, bro. Hieratisch, Leshtik, 3 volumes on the transcription of hieratic. C. Spielberg, demotic grammatic. Heidelberg, Wes Erikson, demotic Leipzig, I should say. 2 volumes, Leipzig. Lexagrammari demotic Egyptian, 1 and 2, Prague. All these here, you can get these. That's Tours Egyptian et Pentecote Classique. This is in French. These upper ones are in German. This is by H. Satis and E. Dryorton. Introduction à l'étude des hieroglyphes in Paris, 1922. And with that said, this is going to end part 3. As you can see, I'm just giving you a preview. These are the text on the Rosetta Stone. We'll get into these. We'll start to cover the goodies. See the hieratic? See how they took the hieratic and transcribed it into the hieroglyphic to make it clearer to read, just to drive the point home, right? Up here, you're like, what's going on? What's going on? Down here, oh, Meret. Oh, Bata, Hatab. You can start to read after that, huh? Ma'a'u. Set, you can start to read there. Up here, a lot of you don't know what this is. You see me and my brothers reading it the other day. You can't read this. You need a little more help, right? Meru, and you didn't know that. Meru Shadi, you don't know. You don't know. Huh? Hati, you don't know, because it takes time to read this other stuff. See the man with the stick here? See the man with the stick here? See the H right here? See this? See that? Look familiar? Bread loaf, 2 strokes. Huh? Bread loaf, 2 strokes. See, you can start to break it down when you've had experience with both. It's a little more difficult for you if you hadn't. And you can see the familiarity in the characters from this, and this. Even from this, we'll start here. From here to here. We can even go here. Meru. 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 It goes to earring right there, right? Then you got this here, right? You don't know which glyph that is. These are 2. You don't know what glyph that is, do you? What's that? That. What's this? This, right? What's these 2 strokes? These 2 strokes. Is this a man with a stick? Looks like a man with a stick or something. Huh? Carrying something, huh? So these are distinctions it takes time for you to make. And then even bigger, to go right down here and see the same thing here. In the demotic, huh? Even bigger to go, like I said. Stages in the game. Stages in the game. But anyway, let me check the chat real quick. We got comments. Original 9, long time. G, what's good with you, baby? What's good, brother 9? what's up to the chat. I ain't even shared this thing yet, so I'll be sharing it shortly. Original 9 does film. We was talking about doing one. I'm sure you've seen portions of the comic. The comics, there's two of them out for Uncle Johnson. I'm about to make some more though. But that's gonna end it out for this particular session. We'll be back with another session. Try to do 4 of them this week. Next time we're gonna read part C. ETE Emmett Tepsini. Remember who you are. Be in the Sar. Uncle Justin Ebb. Uncle Pastor Jed. Dua. And Shadi. Thank you for listening.